Well, thank you so much
Oh,
for your
absolutely.
time today.
Pleasure.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Journal, and thank you for carving out some time for us.
Is this sort of a picturesque look at the city here?
Yes. The news through the years, I guess you would say.
Okay.
These are all from here in our region. So.
Our staff photos. Yeah. I wanted to start, sir, with a campaign ad and a compliment, I guess, if you will. These hands, that's one of my favorite political ads I've ever seen in any presidential campaign. It was inspirational, it was unifying, it was positive. A lot of political ads are just nasty. And I like that one. And I wondered what the goal was on your part with that ad, and what does that ad say about your candidacy as a whole and your campaign as a whole?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I think threatens our nation is the divisiveness that is going on. There's a war on women, race wars, income wars, age wars, religious wars, and a war on just about everything you can imagine. And traditionally, our strength has been in our unity. And, we all form part of the composite. And, we don't have any strength if everybody does the same thing. But if we work together, we can really rise to amazing heights. And that really is the purpose of all that, to let us all know that we all do different things, but we all contribute to the unit.
The other thing I wanted to start with was, you're not a politician, so I'm wondering what motivated you to want to get into this race and put up with the media and the scrutiny and the schedule and the security and all of what's involved in a campaign like this.
Absolutely.
What drove you to want to immerse yourself in all of that?
Well, do realize that I did know that it was going to be like this. Everybody told me long before I got in there that they would be brutal and merciless, particularly because there are no scandals in my life. I never had time to have a scandal. So they'd have to find some other way to try to discredit you. And they would tell a lot of nasty lies. But the way I kind of look at it, our country is at a precipice right now. And we've been led to that precipice by both Democrats and Republicans, a steady stream of politicians who have fancy words and make fancy promises, but for the most part, don't really care. They don't care about the next generation. And, my whole professional career was about the next generation and taking care of those children and making sure that they had not only quality of life, but longevity. And it was very tempting to go ahead with my plans, which were to retire after 15,000 operations and to enjoy life. My wife was looking forward to it even more than I was. But then we had grandchildren. And that was what really changed her mind. She was quite opposed to it. But looking into those innocent little eyes and recognizing that they would not have the same kind of life that we had, the same kind of opportunities. Many have said that the current generation is the first one that will not have a higher quality of life than the one before it. And that's a downward trend that's going to continue if we don't interrupt it right now. And it was just my feeling that maybe the right people were running this time. Maybe this was going to be a big change. But maybe it wasn't. And not being certain of it and fully recognizing that if we continued down this road, we might not get a chance to come back. I said, you can't just talk about it.
On your website, you talk about your support for keeping faith in our society. Talk about that a little bit. What do you mean by that? Are we losing faith in society?
Yeah, we are. We're losing components of our JudeoChristian foundation. There was a time when things like the Ten Commandments were not offensive to people. And now they are. There was a time when, mentioning God in public was not offensive to anyone. And now there are those who say, no, that's somehow a violation of separation of church and state, which of course it is not. It was never intended by our founders that your faith could not be a part of your life and that you had to separate it out. And, the sense that there is no authority for the determination of what is right and what is wrong, and that it's pretty much every man for himself. You decide on your own, based on your own set of morals and values. And the problem with that kind of thinking, of course, is that we've seen manifestations of it in the past in other societies, and it never seems to lead to a good place.
Well, what can a president do to instill more appreciation for faith in society? How does a president approach that?
I think you don't do it so much by your words as you do by your deeds. How do you treat people? Do you respect people? Do you try to foster an atmosphere of civil discussion versus an atmosphere where you simply try to suppress those who disagree with you? That's the kind of atmosphere that I think you should have in a pluralistic society where people have different beliefs. The Constitution guarantees the rights of all citizens. But it doesn't give anybody extra rights where they get to redefine things for everybody else and then force them to do it. I think that's problematic.
A follow-up question on religion is Muslims are the focus of so much discussion today. You've got Mr. Trump who wants a ban on all travel of Muslims into the country. You've got discussion about whether we should be accepting refugees from Syria. And you at one time said you didn't think a Muslim should be president of the United States. I guess my question is, are we at all overreacting unfairly toward all Muslims out of a fear about some Muslims?
Well, let me put it this way. I explained my comments, I think, quite thoroughly, that a Muslim who accepts all the tenets of Islam, including Sharia, would not be compatible with our Constitution. So why would we take someone who is not compatible with our Constitution and make them the authority of our nation? I'm certainly open to somebody who wants to explain to me why that makes sense, but I don't see where it makes any sense. Also, as you may or may not be aware, in 2006, 2007, in the Holy Land Foundation trial, an explanatory memorandum came out as they were looking at the Muslim Brotherhood and some of the other Muslim organizations. And it wasn't supposed to come out, but it did come out, showing what their goals were: to infiltrate, to multiply, to gain positions of influence, and to commit what they call civilization jihad. In other words, to change us from a JudeoChristian foundation to a Muslim foundation. And they said that in America that would be easier than you think because of our political correctness, because we would be more concerned about their rights than we were about our own rights and our own culture. So I tend to adopt the Teddy Roosevelt philosophy. In the early 1900s, Teddy Roosevelt, shortly before his death, said that America is a land of immigrants. And as such, it is our lifeblood, and we accept people from every country, every race, every religion, as long as they want to be Americans, as long as they accept our values and principles and our laws. If they don't want to accept those, they should stay where they are. And I think that's a very reasonable proposition.
How would a Muslim who follows Sharia law not really be
How's that not compatible?
How is it not compatible with the Constitution?
Well, as you probably know, Sharia has different rules for men and women. It says, for instance, it takes the testimony of more women than men as witnesses, so they're not equal. Men have the right to do things that we would consider unseemly to their wives if they don't toe the line. Their view of sexual deviation allows them to kill those who they consider sexual deviants. They have the right to subjugate other religions to their own. Just to name a few things that are not compatible with the way that we do things.
What's your position on the idea of a temporary ban on all Muslims, as Mr. Trump has proposed, coming into the United States?
Well, I don't think that you should ban people based on their religion. I think you should, however, very carefully look at your immigration policies and your visa problem when you know that you're at war. It's one of the reasons that I've called on our Congress to a formal declaration of war against the Islamic State. And when you have that formal declaration, then you begin to relook at your immigration and visa policies on a war footing. So it shouldn't necessarily be religion specific, but there should be things that we look at very closely in terms of determining who should come into this country and who should not. As you, I'm sure, heard, for instance, our government did not think it was fair to look at someone's social media postings. That's absurd. I mean, even if you don't declare war, that's absurd in the world that we live in today. So we ought to really have an interagency cooperative effort to get the best possible criteria for looking at people who are coming in and out of our country, determining how long they should stay and under what circumstances.
How about the Syrian refugee part of it? There's a lot of talk that there should be a pause, a halt for the time being on acceptance of refugees from Syria until we can ensure there's no infiltration, attempted infiltration,
Sure.
no problems with infiltration
Well, of
by
course,
terrorist organizations.
Of course there would be infiltration. ISIS has already said if we bring tens of thousands of Syrians over here, they will infiltrate them. And why wouldn't they? It'd be crazy not to in order to accomplish their goals if you have an easy vehicle for doing it. However, as you know, I went to Jordan not long ago and had an opportunity to speak with many Syrians in the refugee camps there and to question them about what were their actual desires. Because, we've been presented basically with two choices. We've been told we can accept tens of thousands of the Syrian refugees, or we can be cold-hearted and indifferent and turn our backs on them. But those aren't the only two choices. The Syrians said their preference would be to resettle in their own country. And they would also like to be supported in the Jordanian refugee camps by America and other countries. And if you look at the northeast section of Syria, Al-Hasaka province, that area, which is the size of Lebanon, is controlled by the Kurds and the Christians and the Sunnis. There's infrastructure and the ability to settle millions of Syrian refugees there. It would be necessary to make sure they were protected. But the cost of us protecting them would be a lot less than the cost of resettling them here. And that really, I think, should be an international humanitarian effort until such time as they're fully capable of protecting themselves. Bear in mind that there are hundreds of thousands of Syrian men in Saudi Arabia and throughout the Arabian Peninsula and in the Jordanian refugee camps who should be recruited and trained to protect their own homeland.
The Middle East always has been, is, and probably always will be such a mess. We could spend the next 2 days talking about the Middle East. So I'll try to isolate it to ISIS and to Syria for purposes of our discussion. You talked about a declaration of war on ISIS. What else should be involved in the strategy, if you were president, toward ISIS and toward Syria as a whole? And Bashar Assad obviously is part of it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's very important to understand, the whole radical Islamic jihad movement. Jihadism does not work if you don't have a base. So you have to have a caliphate. And they did not have a caliphate from the time of the downfall of the Ottoman Empire in 1924 until recently, when they acquired half of Iraq and a third of Syria. And they also have footholds in Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, places like that. That gives them legitimacy. And they use that legitimacy for their recruiting efforts. They've gone in a few years from 10,000 to 30 to 40,000, and they're continuing to recruit. What we will have to do in order to delegitimize them once again is to destroy their caliphate. Take all of that land back from them. Now, there's been some success, as you've noted, as you've seen, I'm sure, recently. Sinjar was taken back. Working with the Kurds and our special ops people, they cut off all the supply routes, weakened it, and then went in, backed up by our Air Force, and they were able to take that city back. Ramadi also, although there was a lot of collateral damage there. But what I would do is, long-term strategy is to work with our allies and strengthen those ties again. Our traditional allies throughout that whole region. And I'm talking about, Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, all of whom, quite frankly, feel that we are not to be trusted because of the way that we went about the Iranian deal. And, those are relationships that are going to have to be repaired. But in the process, to take the land back from them, we need to be consulting with our military experts and asking them what do they need in order to accomplish this goal. And then we have to make a determination, is this important enough for us that we will give them whatever it is that they need, and that we will not tie their hands behind their back and have them as concerned about whether we're going to prosecute them as whether the enemy is going to kill them. That's not how you fight a war. And then in addition to taking the land back, we have to deprive them of their monetary resources, primarily oil. ISIS is the richest terrorist organization in the world. And why are they so wealthy? Because of oil revenues. We have to either take their oil or destroy their oil, but destroy their mechanism for funding. And then we have to also interrupt their electronic methods of payment, because what they do is they find the disaffected individuals from around the world, including in this country, and entice them with offers of money. We have to shut off their ability to do that, and I think that makes a big difference. And then, they have a command and control center in Raqqa, where they sit up in their fancy offices and smoke cigars and determine what they're going to do next. That's ridiculous. We know they're there. We know that there are 4 entrances and exits, and we know how to shut them off. Obviously, that's what we ought to do. And then send our special ops in at 2 a.m. in the morning and raid them. And we should have them always on the run. And our goal should be to destroy them not to contain them, and not to give them any rest or respite until that is done. And, that's what needs to be done over there. We also need to understand that they have a global mission. And their eyes right now are on Libya. Libya is a possibility of a much greater caliphate than what they have already. And there's more oil there, and the location is very strategic. You go north across the water, you're into southern Europe. You go south, you're into Sudan and Chad and Niger. What an incredible location. Of course they're going to attack there. And, we ought to know that already, and we ought to be making sure that it doesn't happen. And then in this country, we have to also be very aggressive because they already have multiple people here. They already have multiple terror cells here. When I was at the border this summer talking to the sheriffs and the deputy sheriffs down there, and they were telling me about the OTMs, the other than Mexicans, which are a large portion of the people that they're apprehending, and they're not apprehending as many as they're not apprehending. And those people are from Russia and Sudan and Iraq, Syria, and they're coming into our country with no kind of check. And they are hiding, and they are waiting to do all kinds of horrendous things here. So the first thing I think needs to be done is we need to seal that border. And we have the capacity to seal the border. We just don't have the will to do it. And all you have to do is look at an area in Arizona where there are 9 segments. And one of the segments in Yuma County, they were able to completely control by putting in a double fence with an asphalt road in between for quick access and border guards within a quarter mile of each other's. And in addition to that, they prosecuted first-time offenders instead of the catch and release program that we have now. They hit 97% success in stopping the illegal traffic. You can do that in all 9 sectors. And if you were to add motion detectors and drones for early detection, you could get close to 100%. We also have equipment that is able to do deep penetration geographic radar. So if somebody's trying to dig a tunnel underneath it, you can find them.
So law enforcement is telling you that these terrorist cells are coming into our country across the southern border
Yes,
of Mexico.
absolutely.
That's how they're getting.
Absolutely.
Because the average American thinks the discussion about the border with Mexico is about illegal Mexicans coming into our country, and that it doesn't go much beyond that problem, which is a problem.
Exactly.
But I don't think they think of it in
No, they
those
don't.
terms.
They don't. And that to me is a bigger reason to seal the border than try to keep, people from Central America and South America out. And like I said, it's eminently doable. And we have the ability to do it. We don't have the will to do it. But that's not all we need to do over here. We also need to train Americans about what to do if they're caught up in a terrorist attack. San Bernardino is by no stretch of the imagination the end of this. This is going to be going on for quite some time. When I was a kid, we used to have air raid drills. You knew what to do when the siren came on. We have to teach people what they have to do. And, I hate to say it, it sounds all Pollyannish what the president's solution is. Restrict the guns. We can restrict the guns, we keep that plan. But believe me, the terrorists don't care about any gun restrictions that you put there. Well, if anything, we need to be offering our citizens lessons on how to use their weapons effectively. And I use as a case in point Israel. You'll notice there are no mass shootings at Israeli schools, even though they sit in the midst of the most violent cultures in the world. And they're infiltrated with a lot of people with desires to wreak havoc. Why? Because in all Israeli schools, there are teachers who are specially trained in how to handle those situations, and they are armed. And so it doesn't happen. You may have noticed in this country, when we have the mass shootings, it generally occurs in a gun-free zone. These people are not crazy. You know, they go where they're not likely to be killed.
See, you would arm teachers and train.
I didn't say that. I said what happened in Israel. We may have a number of things that are available to us. We may have veterans who are specifically trained in that area. We may be able to use retired policemen or active policemen. You know, I'm not saying that we have to do it exactly the way the Israelis do it, but I'm saying that there is a principle. Because as much as we'd like to live in a Pollyannish world where everybody is wonderful, we don't live there. So we have to deal with that. And then I think the other thing is we have to do a much better job of monitoring the internet traffic and disrupting their social networks, disrupting their servers, and also giving alternative messages because they go after disaffected people. We need to go after disaffected people too, but with the right messages. And then we need to be dealing with the imams and the clerics. And they have to get involved. They have to help us to identify those who are becoming radicalized and what kinds of things we have to look for. And if they're not willing to do that, or they can't do that, then how can we be expected to do it? And if we can't do it, then obviously we're going to have to come up with some other methods of protecting ourselves.
Just to go back, I want to say this back to you and make sure I understand. You said you talked, was it Arizona law enforcement officials?
Yes.
That told you that terrorist cells are coming across the southern border?
You sound like that's news to you.
Terrorist cells from what? How could you pinpoint to what terror cell we're talking about?
Well, they told me specifically that they were capturing people from Russia, from Sudan, from Iraq, from Syria, and from a variety of places where they should not be coming from. That's why they call them OTMs, other than Mexicans.
Thank you.
Now, this is a pretty dangerous picture you're painting of terror cells coming into the country from the southern border, Cold War-like drills being necessary within society, the need for more instruction and usage of guns to protect ourselves, just a matter of time before we have more San Bernardinos. So you really have quite a fatalistic sort of vision of the future in our country.
It's
if
here.
Certain steps are
It's
not
here.
taken. I mean,
It's here.
It's here, and it's not exaggerated. The
It's not
fear,
exaggerated
because there is
at all.
palpable fear in the country, and
And
some
there
say
should
it's
be.
overdone, and others say it's understandable and reasonable, and you would be one of those who say
But-
that fear exists and is real.
Well, I don't know if it's so much fear as it is concern. Because I think a lot of the American people know about the very things that I just talked about. But they see a government that is kind of, yeah, come on, you guys, it's not that bad. And, you hate to find out that it is that bad. Because, and mark my words, you're going to find out.
You're convinced there's going to be a Paris-like attack
There's
in
going
a
to
matter of time?
There's going to be more incidents. There is no question about it. And the only way that we're going to stop it is the things that I'm talking about.
Now, on guns, you've got a gun discussion related to terrorism concerns. You've got a gun discussion related to other kinds of concerns. A guy in a movie theater, he's not a terrorist from
Right.
Chad or Sudan or Iraq. He was just a crazy guy in Colorado.
Sure.
So What do you think of the president's executive action on guns and just the idea of gun control in general? The need for more, less, the need to enforce the gun laws we have. Because sometimes the talk about guns on the part of some make it sound as if we should just return to the Old West and we should all have a holster and we'd all be much better off if we all were packing heat and could protect ourselves.
So two separate issues. You asked about the president's executive orders. I believe that the use of executive orders, not just by this president, but by several presidents before, has been distorted. If you go back and you look at the Constitution and you see what executive orders actually should be used for, it's for times when Congress is not in session and something needs to be done. It's supposed to be done on a temporary basis until such time as they return and are able to address the issue. It has been massively distorted. That's problematic. Now, in terms of gun control, I think the discussions about gun control are good. They need to be had in ways that we can protect our society, particularly from madmen. We need to be able to look at all of these incidents, and I've been saying this for a while, where these mass shootings occur. In many cases, we see that there was mental disturbance that was documented, and yet nothing was done. We need to figure out as a society, how do we in fact profile these people, and how do we intervene before the tragedy occurs, not only to protect the innocent, but to protect the lives of these individuals themselves. That's vitally important. So I don't have any problem with that, but we must also always keep the Second Amendment front and center. We cannot do things in such a way that we compromise the rights of the people.
And it just seems to me like whenever there's a proposal about a gun control law, it isn't compromising the Second Amendment in terms of the fear seems to be they're coming for all of our guns and they're going to take all of our guns away. I've never heard a single gun control proposal that proposed to confiscate everyone's guns away. But that seems to be the fear, that that's a first step toward the ultimate confiscation of all guns.
Well, I'm a very reasonable person when it comes to this kind of thing. And I say, if you have a proposal, a gun control proposal, and we can apply that to some of these situations that have occurred, and you can see where it would have stopped it, I think we ought to be all very enthusiastic about that.
Mm-hmm. Going back to the border, the other part of the border situation and illegal immigration is the discussion about the illegals already in our country. What's your position on those, they say 11, 12 million undocumented?
Well, first of all, it's all part of a comprehensive program. So in order to stop it, you got to seal all the borders. And you have to turn off the spigot that dispenses the goodies so that there's nothing that's drawing them here. Okay, that leaves you with the 11.5+ million who are already here. And the question is, what do you do?
What's the spigot of goodies? Spigot of goodies, if I could just stop you.
No benefits.
Benefits being?
Jobs, welfare, education, anything. The 11.5 million plus who are already here, my feeling is that if they have a pristine record and they want to stay, as guest workers, we give them a 6-month window to register. That way they are here legally. It does not make them citizens. It does not give them voting rights, but they no longer have to live in the shadows where they are frequently abused and blackmailed. They have to be willing to work as guest workers in areas where we need them, and specifically areas like agriculture. I've talked to a number of farmers in Iowa and South Dakota who have multi-thousand-acre ranches, and they say they've tried to hire Americans unsuccessfully at $11 an hour. Can't do it. those kind of places would collapse if we round them all up and send them back. It doesn't make any sense. We'd be paying $15 for a pack of tomatoes. Same thing with many aspects of the hospitality industry. So we have them work in areas where we need them. I don't think there has to be any limitation on that. So they can work for as long as they want to, under those circumstances, as long as they maintain that pristine record. If they want to become American citizens, they have to go through the same process as anybody else who wants to be an American citizen.
But they would be given that opportunity if they met those criteria you just described. No deportation force for your residency.
I don't think that makes any sense, quite frankly.
But they would be subject to any penalties for being here.
Well, they have to pay a back tax penalty when they get registered, and they have to pay taxes going forward.
I wanted to switch gears entirely to your support for a flat tax idea. Why is that the route to go?
Well, because it's fair. Proportionality. If you make $10 billion, you pay $1 billion. You make 10, you pay 1. And you get rid of all the loopholes and all the deductions. Because as soon as you have a loophole, deduction, a tax credit, what have you, everybody starts manipulating everything to be able to take advantage of it. And some people are far more capable of taking advantage of it than others. So rather than have that situation, just make it flat and proportional. Some have criticized me because I say I got that idea from the Bible. Like anything from the Bible is evil, but it's not. God said, I want a tithe. He didn't say, if your crops fail, you don't owe me any tithe. He didn't say, if you have a bumper crop, you owe me triple tithe. So there's something inherently fair about proportionality. And that's why I like the flat tax. It's very simple. Right now our tax code is somewhere between 75,000 and 80,000 pages. Why is it so complex? Because we're using taxation for more than the revenues to run the government. We're using it to control behavior. And that was not the intent when our Constitution was written.
Wouldn't every special interest think it was evil and they'd all be aligned against it?
I don't care.
It would be a hard one.
I don't think it would be that hard.
You don't?
I don't. Special interests are given way too much credit. Everything in
They
Washington.
have a lot of clout on the Hill, a lot of money.
No clout with me. That's why I don't accept any money from special interest groups or from billionaires who want to influence me. And I wouldn't do that as president either. So I do understand that they will all be aligned against me. I understand they're all aligned against me now, and that's why they try to write my obituary every week. But I don't care about that. Because at some point, somebody has to stand up for what's right and not for what's politically expedient.
I ask the question because the Congress would have to pass the law that changes the tax code and make it a flat tax, and they are the ones who would be subject to the pressure from the special interests.
I have talked to a lot of people in Congress, and they are fully on board with it. I don't think it's going to be that much of a problem, but, as president, I would be very different than the current president in the sense that I would open up channels of communication with Congress, because Congress are the representatives of the people. And this country is supposed to be of, for, and by the people. And I would make the deliberations between the executive branch and the legislative branch public so that everybody has access to them and they can see who the people are who are advocating for them and who the people are who are the sticks in the mud. And I think a lot of sticks in the mud will disappear when they know people are watching them.
Obamacare. You once said it was the worst thing that had happened in America since slavery. That's a pretty strong statement, obviously.
It is.
My question about Obamacare, I know you want to repeal. You're for repeal of Obamacare and basically starting over with something different. Would that not create even more chaos if we dismantle everything that's occurred over the last few years and try to start again from scratch, as opposed to just making adjustments in areas where it's not working and leaving the framework in place?
Well, let me tell you what I've suggested. Well, first of all, I do agree that language was too strong, and you'll notice that I have toned my language down quite a bit because I realize that no matter how good your point is, if people can't hear you because they're so concerned about your language, it doesn't do any good to have said it. But the reason I was so concerned about Obamacare is because it changes the dynamic between the people and the government. The people are at the pinnacle and the government is there to serve the people. With Obamacare, the government says, we don't care what you people think, this is what we're doing. If you don't like it, tough. That changes the dynamic, and that is a severe problem if we continue down that road. Now, what I have suggested is not that we immediately try to repeal Obamacare, but rather that we offer something different, what I call health empowerment accounts. Health empowerment accounts would be available from the time you were born until the time you die, and you pass it on at the time of death to members of your family. We pay for it with the same dollars that we pay for traditional health care with. And we use a lot of dollars for traditional health care, twice as much as many other countries, and yet we have terrible access problems. You give people the ability to shift money within their health empowerment account, which is very similar to a health savings account minus the bureaucrats. So you have the opportunity to utilize it for any medical purpose. And if you can shift money within a family, it gives you just enormous flexibility, easily cover 80% of all encounters that you're going to have with the medical community. Also makes every family their own insurance company with no middleman. And it makes you care about each other. Now, that'll take care of 75% of the population. Does not take care of the indigent. But how do we take care of them now? Medicaid. Annual Medicaid budget, almost $500 billion. How many people involved? Nearly 80 million, which is way too many, by the way, but that's another discussion. If you divide it out, more than $5,000 per man, woman, and child on Medicaid. What could you buy with that? Concierge practices, which rich people buy, tend to be about $2,000 to $3,000 a year. And you still have thousands left over for your catastrophic insurance, which is much cheaper now. And we provide them with a list of insurances that they can buy, very much like Medicare Part C, MediChoice, where the government gives you a stipend and you can buy. Same kind of situation. And the difference is now they're like everybody else. They're not second-class citizens. 55% of physicians don't want to see patients with Medicaid because it costs them more to see them than they receive back. You know, we eliminate that kind of situation and don't have two-tiered Medicaid, two-tiered medical care. And I'm sensitive to that, having grown up poor and understanding what that felt like, and it doesn't need to be. And the same thing with Medicare. You know, about 25% of physicians don't want to see Medicare patients, but I would modify that program, eliminate Part D altogether, expand Part C to include all the options, must include catastrophic care and drug program. And also, those individuals would be able to have, you know, health empowerment accounts. Right now, as you know, health savings accounts with Medicare and severely limited. There's absolutely no reason that people can't continue with their health empowerment account when they reach Medicare age and be able to have that fully working and use their subsidy to choose which program they want in Part C And right now, if there's excess money left over, as there frequently is, a quarter of it immediately goes back to the government. The other 3/4 supposedly are used to help whoever the person is, although no one knows where it goes. In this case, the excess money would go immediately into your health empowerment account, so you know exactly what's going on with it. Also, you can buy more insurance because you've got your health empowerment account. So when you need your flu shot, or you need a physical, or you know the X-ray, or you need some physical therapy, all that's coming out of your health empowerment account. It doesn't come out of your major policy. So again, it makes all the people who are on Medicare much more attractive. So nobody's going to be shunning those patients at that point. And I wouldn't force people into it. I would say, if you want regular Medicare, have at it. Not a problem. But it wouldn't take very long before people be saying, their friends who are on the new program, well, how come you get to go to any doctor you want? How come I'm stuck? It won't be very long before everybody goes over there. I don't think you have to force people into things if they work.
The fundamental problem you have with Obamacare is it changes the dynamic, as you said, between government and the citizenry. It's a top-down as opposed to
Plus it doesn't work.
The government as opposed to empowering the people.
Right. Plus it doesn't work. It's not affordable. It's too expensive. The reason they claim that that the costs have gone down, the reason the costs have gone down is because nobody wants to go. If they don't want to pay a $6,000, deductible. I'd rather just not go. Mm-hmm. That doesn't work.
Are we on time?
Can we do like one or two more questions?
Yeah, that'd be great. I've got another 8-10 here on my list. Let's see. I'll move this one up. I know this falls under the category you were just talking about, probably, of change in the language you use. But I'm interested to have you talk a little bit about what you meant here. And this was from 2014 in an interview with Breitbart, where you had said that we're living in a Gestapo age, and America has become very much like Nazi Germany because people are afraid to say what they actually believe. That's pretty strong language when you compare America to Nazi Germany, of course. But talk a little bit about what you mean about people's fear to say what they really think.
Well, what I was talking about is that, in Nazi Germany, a lot of the people really did not believe in what Hitler was doing. But they didn't speak up. They didn't say anything. They remained silent. And, that is what allows the progression of sometimes pretty radical ideals. And I would hate to see something like that happen in our country, where people actually are afraid to stand up for what they believe in. And I think some of that is going on in our country because of political correctness. A lot of people are afraid to say what they actually believe because they will be ostracized, because they will get IRS audit, because somebody will mess with their job or their kid's job.
Now, you talked about the PC police.
That's a dangerous, very dangerous, slippery slope.
Go ahead, Kid.
Yeah, I just kind of want, with time limited, at one time, not too long ago, you were leading the polls in Iowa, and you've slid back a ways. You've had some turnover in your staff, and I just saw that happened in New Hampshire just this week. Some staff have left to the Cruz campaign.
Not from our campaign, from a
Okay.
super PAC, which we have
Okay.
nothing to do with.
Okay, but I just wondering if how confident you still feel about getting a top finish here in Iowa, which of course you invest a lot of effort in the state, spend a lot of time here. Right?
Well, I think we're going to do very well. We've been around the state. This the fourth town hall coming up today, getting in front of a lot of people. And, the consistent message that I hear from people is, I'm so glad you came. I had gotten the wrong impression, and I'm back. That's what I hear all the time. And we'll just continue to get out in front of people. I don't need to change my message. I think the message is the same message. There has been a lot of distorting of what I've said. And, I've had people come out and say I operated on fetal tissue and just complete lies. And, you have to burst all of those myths. But, I never anticipated that I was going to get into a situation where everybody was going to be fair. So, if you can't withstand those things, how can you withstand what you're going to see in the White House?
But having such an upheaval in your staff this close to the caucus, that shouldn't give your supporters any pause that, there's turmoil going on.
It should give them confidence to know that when we see something that needs augmentation, we do it. And we don't sit there and put your finger in the air and say, well, if I do it at this time, what is the effect of it? That's what politicians do. I'm not a politician.
The staff never held up a 1, so I'm going to go to what was going to be my last question, and that is, I sort of give any of the candidates we meet with an opportunity to sort of do a short stump speech at the end, if they will. And I give you the chance to make your case to Iowans on why you're the best GOP candidate in the field and why they ought to caucus for you.
Well, I would say that I've probably had the most life experiences that reflect the American population. I've had an opportunity to live at every socioeconomic level from the bottom to the top. I've had a multitude of different jobs. I'm sure I've had more 2 a.m. in the morning phone calls where you had to make life and death decisions than anybody else. I've had to face an enormous amount of controversy in my medical career because I was always pushing the envelope and didn't accept that something couldn't be done. And, had the opportunity to change the way a lot of things are done that have saved a lot of lives. Have had an opportunity to work with complex teams of people with a lot of knowledge and help to guide them all into the same mind frame to allow us to accomplish amazing things. And I think that's what a president has to be able to do. There is no one who knows everything. But as Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, said, in the multitude of counselors is safety. You have to be humble enough to recognize that and to be able to work with those individuals in an effective way. And we happen to be blessed with amazing talent in this country.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.